Hello and welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Here you get relevant and timely content you won't find anywhere else. You can learn more by going to mustreadalaska.com, and this show can be found on YouTube, Facebook, X, and your favorite podcast site. Let's talk truth about politics, the economy, and all things Alaska. Now, the host of the show, former state legislator, combat veteran, small business owner, and all-around great guy, Ben Carpenter.
Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show, friends. This is Ben Carpenter. This is a special episode of the show. Normally, this week is reserved, in my mind, for focusing on and reflecting upon the events of September 11th, 2001, and the attacks on the World Trade Center and what the following national reaction was to that included my continued military service and deployment overseas. And it shaped who I am as an individual and shaped my family and was a significant event in my life. But instead of doing that this week, it's been a week of weeks, we had the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I can remember a similar emotional response from people when the attacks happened in 9/11. It's similar, but not nearly as visceral, I think. You know, I wasn't in New York. Maybe it's wrong to say that, broadly characterizing it. I'm sure the people in New York were having a visceral response. Those other locations in Washington, D.C. and in Pennsylvania where planes came down as well, I'm sure it was visceral for those people. But for me, I was in Utah in college and watched the events unfold on the computer and on the TV as a national news was covering this event. And I remember clear as day the second plane flying into the tower was being filmed, and I mean you saw it. Similar to what you saw with the Charlie Kirk assassination. It was happening in real time. And I remember there were 2 or 3 Air Force, active duty Air Force members in the class, university class that we were in. And they immediately got up and left, and we never saw them again. I'd already served 4 years, was in my 5th year of military service at that time, and I knew we were at war. Life was never going to be the same. It was a turning point in our national awareness of Islamic violence and terrorism and evil. People wanting to kill us. It was interesting to see the national response to evil. You know, for many generations, and try to get into this here in a minute, but for many, this most significant emotional event that has happened to them is the COVID crisis that we had. You know, not exactly a violent event, right? But one that caused a whole lot of fear. You know, there's this virus attacks us, and then I don't know, there's whole lots of theories about where it came from and whether it was intentional or not. But you know what? There's people playing with viruses to this day. I just trust that that's happening. Viruses that can, kill indiscriminately. Other nasty bugs. That's evil. That's evil on the face of this earth. You take a government response to this COVID crisis, probably with best intentions. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. But they withhold the risks of the jab. They withhold the risks. They don't tell us what the risks are for whatever reason. And people end up dying from the cure. The cure, right? In my book, that's evil. But that's the extent of what many people have grown up with since 9/11. That's the extent of the danger or the the evil, the bad things that people have had to deal with. You get this Charlie Kirk assassination, and it's visceral. If you've watched it, like it's something that is not been in the public conscious in the United States ever. Ever. I mean, you think about this. We've had the assassination and assassination attempts. We've had school shootings, right? You've got JFK, MLK, RFK, like Reagan's attempted assassination of Reagan, attempted assassination of Trump. You got the healthcare CEO, Luigi Mangione, I think is his name. He was assassinated. You got the Minnesota legislator that was assassinated. Got a whole host of school shootings. I don't want to minimize any of these, but none of them were visceral. Like none of them were filmed as closely and as detailed as what we saw with Charlie Kirk. And for a whole lot of people, a whole lot of Americans, this is the first time that they are witnessing evil in their life. What does this do to a national conscience? Like, you got to realize that many people are suffering from a moral injury right now. This visceral nature of this assassination in our time it injures in a very real way your moral expectations in life. You know, you get to the people who are in their 80s and 90s, what we call the silent generation. They remember the 1960s and the civil unrest that happened there, the assassinations, right? They're in their 20s and 30s at the time. They're raising a family. Baby boomers, they're in their 60s and 70s now. They were just coming of age, becoming adults during the turbulent 60s. They remember living through the aftermath of the assassinations of Kennedy's and MLK, Martin Luther King Jr. You know, those of us that are in our 40s and 50s now, Generation X, we served in Iraq and Afghanistan. We watched 9/11 happen. There's this kind of unity that happened after 9/11 that's kind of shattered right now because of this Charlie Kirk assassination. Our world's been rocked a little bit. We lived through the attempted assassinations of Trump and the killing of the Minnesota legislature, you know, the school shootings. None of those compare to what we saw with the Charlie Kirk assassination. Millennials, those of you in your 20s to 40s age range, you guys probably remember 9/11. You feel the assassination of Charlie Kirk a little different than I do. He's your peer. He's what, 31, 32 years old? You come out of COVID, which is probably your first real hardship. You're raising your young family, and you're seeing this nation in a moral decline and questioning the sanity of what's going on in our country as you're raising your family. Kind of like the silent generation, our grandparents are 80 and 90-year-old folks now, what they went through with the civil unrest in the 60s, similar to it, but not nearly as visceral as what we've just witnessed. You know, those of you that are in your young 20s, you don't remember 9/11. What you just saw with Charlie Kirk's assassination is probably your first visceral take on evil. Many of you looked up to Charlie Kirk. You grew up with him, looked up to him. And this is hitting you right there. You know, months before his assassination, Kirk popularized a phrase. He used the phrase assassination culture, and he said it was spreading on the left. This is a post that he made on social media. It was like 10 million views, right? And he was tying some polling data from an organization called the Network Contagion Research Institute, NCRI. I don't know much about them. They're a group dedicated to identifying and predicting ideologically motivated threats, things like that. Guess I'll have to do some research on them. Anyway, he said he's tying this data showing that there's a surging violence, a surging tolerance for violence among left-leaning groups. Lots of reasons for that. He posited this, but the point that I'm getting to is this culture and acceptance of violence in our nation. He's speaking about it prior to his death. He highlights that in California, activists named a ballot measure after the individual who assassinated Luigi Mangione, the CEO of the healthcare corporation, right? As when we're going to put a badge of honor on the individual who killed that person. In March of this year, this NCRI organization produced a report entitled The Emerging Assassination Culture. This is led by a man by the name of Joel Finkelstein. It analyzed online data showing glorification, increased attempts, and changing norms converging into acceptance of ideological assassinations. Key findings from this report: 48% of liberals justified violence against Elon Musk. Again, this is the beginning of 25. 55% justified violence against President Trump. After the assassination of the healthcare CEO, searches online for assassination tools spiked 300%. After this Kirk assassination, this organization told Newsweek that Kirk's death reflected the exact warning signs and an emerging assassination culture and rising appetite for political violence. You just look at the online celebrations, and this is not what you would have found in the other times where we've witnessed assassinations. This is not something that is normal for Americans. Finkelstein was on Fox News and he says, what was formerly taboo has become acceptable. My fear is that this just continues and that people who are lacking moral character feel that they can take violence into their hands and attack those of us who wish to have a life and a culture and a family and a society that has moral foundations to it. This is the risk that we have going forward. The crisis in our nation is one of morality. Kirk was talking about this. I'll bring your attention back to the foundations of this country. President John Adams, 1798. He's writing a letter to the officers of the 1st Brigade of the 3rd Division of the Militia of Massachusetts. In part, his letter says, and I quote, We have no government armed with power, capable of contending with human passions, unbridled by morality and religion. Avarice, ambition, revenge, or gallantry would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Self-government, this experiment in self-government, relies upon a people with ethical, moral character. This means that a population, our population, needs to rely upon and be willing to sacrifice personal grievances, partisan impulses, the temptation to retaliate, to prevent further violence. Those are characteristics of people with morals, with moral principles. And if we've got a bunch of left-leaning nut jobs out there with no moral character who are willing to take violence into their own hands to further their way of life, we don't have a government and a structure, a society structure that's able to survive in that type of environment. We need a population willing to lead moral and principled lives, and it is necessary to stop this moral decay. It's happening all around us. I don't have to prove it. You know it, you see it, you live it. There's no partisan solution. It's not a political problem. There's no legislative solution. You can't ask your legislature at your local level, your city councils. You can't ask Washington, D.C. There's no executive order of the president that'll restore our society. You fight evil with faith. You fight evil with obedience to God's commandments. You fight evil with selfless behavior. You put others' interests ahead of your own. Fathers, you put your kids' interests and your wife's interests ahead of your own. You don't fight evil with more evil. This country doesn't survive if we think that retribution and more evil is the answer. Charlie Kirk was right. His organization, he labeled the turning point. We're exactly at a turning point in our nation's history. It's up to each individual. We're either going to turn our attention and our priorities to living a moral life, or we're going to continue to see the moral decline, depravity, and violence in our nation. You think that guns are going to solve the problem? Yeah. Guns get you more violence. Yes, they're necessary because I'm going to defend my family. But we're not going to solve the underlying root cause of the problem with guns. We don't want to live in a society where he with the most guns wins. We don't want to live in a society that a strong federal government or strong state government steps in and puts us into a police state to manage the violence. Are you listening, Chicago? Seattle? Portland? Where else? Every major metropolitan area? If we don't individually choose to seek out a moral existence, then I fear that the country that we're leaving our kids and our grandkids will look nothing like the country that was left to us. So, it's up to you. It's up to me. It's up to you. It's not up to our government. It's up to us individually. That's not easy. It's the hardest thing that we can be asked to do. But it's the only thing that's going to make a difference. Let this be a turning point for our nation. Let the martyrdom of Charlie Kirk be a rallying cry, not for more violence, but for an emulation of his style and his leadership. Lead with words, lead with deeds, lead with a moral life.